At 3 a.m., the Mafia boss received a shocking call. His secretary was behind bars asking for him. It was 3 in the morning when the phone rang. Most of the city was asleep. The streets of Naples were quiet, still wet from the rain that had fallen earlier in the night. A few streetlights reflected off the damp road below, but there was no one around to see them. Up in the penthouse at the top of the Castello building, everything was dark and still. No nameplate on the door. No record of the address in any public file. That was exactly how Dante Ferraro wanted it. He had been a light sleeper for more than 20 years. That habit came with the kind of life he led. Even in the deepest part of the night, one part of his mind stayed half awake, listening. So when the phone buzzed on the nightstand, his hand was already reaching for it before the second ring had finished. He looked at the screen, Naples Central Police Station. He did not move for a moment. He just looked at those 4 words. His mind, even at 3 in the morning, was already running through possibilities. Who? Why? What did they want from him? A man in his position did not get calls from police stations by accident. Either someone had been caught, or someone wanted him to think someone had been caught. He answered. The voice on the other end was calm and professional. A duty officer. He said they had a woman in their custody. She had given Dante's name as her emergency contact. Her name, the officer said, was Giulia Conti. Dante sat up slowly in the dark. Giulia Conti had worked for him for 11 years. She was his secretary, his office manager, the quiet and careful woman who kept all of his legal businesses running without a single problem. The import company, the restaurant group, the property offices, all of it passed through Giulia's hands. She handled the paperwork, the payments, the schedules, the correspondence. She kept things clean and tight and invisible. In 11 years, she had never made a mistake that reached his desk. She had never drawn the wrong kind of attention. She had never put a foot wrong. And tonight, she was sitting in a police holding cell. What is she charged with? Dante asked. His voice came out low and steady. Nothing in it gave away the cold feeling that had just settled somewhere in his chest. The officer listed the charges. Unlawful possession of classified financial documents. Suspected involvement in a conspiracy to commit fraud. Possibly more charges to follow once the documents were fully reviewed. Dante asked if she was hurt. The officer said no. She was physically fine. Tell her I know, Dante said. Then he ended the call. He was dressed and walking out the door in under 5 minutes. His driver, Marco, was already parked outside. Marco had been with Dante for 8 years. He had one great quality above all others. He never asked questions. He started the engine the moment Dante appeared, and the black car moved quietly through the wet, empty streets, without a single word being exchanged between them. In the back seat, Dante sat with his hands resting on his knees and thought carefully. Giulia was not the kind of person who ended up in trouble. She was not careless. She was not greedy. She was not the sort to take risks she hadn't thought through a dozen times first. In all the years she had worked for him, she had made it her business to stay as far as possible from anything that could bring the wrong kind of attention. She knew exactly which side of the line she stood on, and she never crossed it, which meant something very unusual had happened tonight. He made a call on the way. Emilio Greco, his lawyer, answered on the 3rd ring, voice rough with sleep. Dante gave him the address and told him to come. Emilio didn't argue. He was already pulling on his coat before the call ended. The inside of Naples Central smelled like old coffee and cheap floor cleaner, white lights, hard plastic chairs. A front desk officer who had clearly been awake all night and was no longer interested in anything. Dante walked in, found a seat against the wall, and waited. He did not speak to anyone. He did not look around the room with interest. He simply sat there, still and patient, like a man who had learned a long time ago that patience was more powerful than noise. Emilio arrived about 15 minutes later, coat thrown over what looked like pajamas, reading glasses pushed up on his head. He went straight to the desk and started talking quietly to the officer about access to the detainee. Dante watched from his seat and said nothing. Another 20 minutes passed. Then a door on the far side of the room opened, and Giulia walked in. She looked tired. The silver-streaked hair she always kept pulled back neatly had come slightly loose. She was still wearing the same gray blazer she had on at the office the previous afternoon. She sat down across from Dante at a small table in the consultation room and looked at him the way a person looks at someone they are very relieved to see but are trying hard not to show it. "Tell me everything," Dante said. His voice was quiet, not cold, just focused. She told him. She had stayed late at the office that evening. That was not unusual for her. She often worked past 9, especially when the end of the month was close. At around 10:30, she received an email. It came to her personal address, not her work one. The name in the sender field was Luca Amendola. Dante kept his face still. Luca Amendola, Giulia explained, had worked for Dante's import firm about 3 years ago. He was an accountant, reliable and quiet. He had left the company to take a position at a government financial oversight agency. She and Luca had stayed in touch now and then after he left. Nothing personal, just the occasional message about old work matters. She had always found him trustworthy. The email had contained an encrypted file. When she opened it, she found financial documents. Pages of them. They looked official. They carried the name and the digital stamp of Dante's company at the top. But the numbers inside, the account details, the transfer records, the figures, were things she had never seen before. They didn't match anything in the books she kept. They described transactions she knew nothing about, moving through accounts she had never heard of. Her first thought was that something had been done without her knowledge. Her second thought was that Dante needed to see this immediately. She did not send it by email. She did not forward it to anyone. She printed the documents, sealed them inside an envelope, and made a plan to bring them straight to Dante first thing in the morning. She thought she was being careful. She walked out of the office building at 11:15. 2 plainclothes officers were standing on the pavement, just outside the entrance. They already knew her name. They already had a warrant. They stopped her before she reached her car and placed her under arrest. The envelope was inside her bag. That was exactly what they were looking for. Dante listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, the room went quiet for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "Giulia," he said, slowly and clearly. "Luca Amendola has been dead for 14 months. She went completely still. He was found in the sea off the coast of Capri. The official report listed it as an accidental drowning." Dante paused for just a moment. It was not accidental. She did not speak right away. He could see her putting it together in her head, piece by piece, working through what it meant. He let her do that. She was a smart woman. She deserved the space to reach the conclusion herself. "Someone used his name," she said quietly. It was not a question. Someone used his name, his old contact details, possibly an email account they built to look like his, or an old account they managed to access. They sent you that file knowing you would open it because you recognized who it was from. They filled it with documents that were designed to look suspicious and to look like they came from this company. They knew you wouldn't panic and send it around. They knew you would print it and keep it close. Giulia pressed her lips together. "And they told the police what time I would be leaving." "Yes. So I was never the target," she said. "No. You were the delivery. They needed those documents to be in someone's hands, someone with a real connection to me, when the police stopped them. Not on a screen, not floating in an email server somewhere, physically printed. Something that could be taken as evidence, examined, entered into a file." Giulia sat back slightly. "What does that give them?" "The beginning of a case that doesn't exist yet," Dante said. "False documents with my company's name on them, now sitting inside a police evidence bag. That's a foundation. Someone builds on that, adds more pieces, and eventually, you have an investigation that looks very real, even if everything underneath it was created from nothing." She was quiet for a moment. "This was planned. This took time." "A lot of time," Dante agreed. "And a lot of knowledge about how things work here. That last part mattered most. This wasn't someone guessing from the outside. Whoever had put this together knew about Giulia. They knew about the old employee. They knew her habits, her hours, the fact that she would print something sensitive rather than risk it on a network. They had studied the way Dante's office moved from close enough to see the details clearly. This came from someone on the inside, or someone who had been there once and remembered everything. Dante stood up and looked over at Emilio, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner the whole time. "Get her out tonight. Whatever it takes. I want her home before the sun comes up." Emilio nodded and walked out to speak with the officers at the desk. Giulia looked up at Dante. For the first time that night, something honest showed on her face. Not panic, not tears, just the quiet weight of a person who realizes they were used. "I should have called you the moment I saw that email," she said. "I should have come to you first. You did what an honest, careful person would do. Dante said. "You tried to verify it before bringing it to me. That's exactly why they picked you." He picked up his coat from the back of the chair. "Go home. Don't speak to anyone about what happened tonight. Not friends, not family. Emilio will call you in the morning about the hearing. And Giulia." He paused at the doorway. "Thank you for using my name when they put you in that cell. Not anyone else's. Mine." She gave a small nod. Nothing more was needed. He walked out through the front doors of the police station and into the early morning air. The rain had stopped. The pavement was still wet and dark, reflecting the overhead lights in long strips of orange and white. The city was almost completely silent. In another hour, it would begin to wake up. The bread shops, the delivery trucks, the first workers heading out. And the night would become just another night that most people would never know about. Dante stood on the steps for a moment. Then he took out his phone and made one short call. 3 words. Find the accountant. Not Luca Amendola. Luca was gone, had been gone for over a year. But someone very much alive had spent weeks or maybe months putting this together. They had found the name, built the identity, studied the target, timed the arrest perfectly, and managed to keep all of it hidden until the exact moment they wanted it to land. That kind of work required patience. It required resources. And it required knowing the inside of Dante's world well enough to move inside it without being seen. Marco brought the car around. Dante got in without a word. As the car moved slowly through the quiet streets, the city began to show the first small signs of a new day. A shopkeeper rolling up a metal shutter. The smell of coffee drifting out of somewhere. A cat crossing the road without looking up. Ordinary life. Continuing as it always did. But inside the black car, Dante Ferraro sat with something new in his mind. Not fear, not anger, but focus. Sharp and clean, and very, very calm. Someone had spent a long time building a trap for him. They had used an innocent woman. They had woken him at 3 in the morning. They had shown him exactly how close they could get without him knowing. They were right about all of that. But they had made one mistake. The kind of mistake that people only make once. They had let him know they existed. And from this morning forward, Dante was no longer the one being watched.